You'll have the agenda in front of you this morning. I have apologies from Councillor Hutt, who's feeling unwell. Councillor Ryan, I see you are in the room. Are you a partial or what's your intention today?
Thanks. Early departure. Apologies for early departure.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any other apologies to note? For lateness for Kish. And online we have Councillor Thompson, Councillor Casey Cox and Councillor Taylor. Welcome. Thank you. Move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bidder and all those in favour. Thank you. Now move to confirmation of agenda. You'll note that items 6 and 8 have swapped places today, which is the usual order, and when they were uploaded they were out of sequence. So this is just writing that. Can I have a mover? Councillor Ryan and Councillor Mark. Thank you. All those in favour. Declarations of interest, any? I know you're all particularly interested in our finance. Oh, yes, yes. Yes, you'll have to wait. You'll have to wait and we'll ask Moko to give us some information about that a little bit later. It is a little remiss of me not to have opened our meeting with a karakia, as I promised. So before we go to public forum, I wonder if you would like to join us, a little late, apologies, with our karakia. I sent it out last night for a bit of a practice for those who wanted to, but I'd like to invite you all to say it as a group, including staff. It's the council karakia, so it should be familiar to all of you. So let's lead that off. Ka pai. Tuia e rongo, tuia e raro, tuia e roto, tuia e waho. Tuia ngā kaiamahi o te konehira o Kirikiriroa. Whaia te iti kahurangi, kia u, kia mai, kia ita, huie, houie, tai kie. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Get used to that. Can I welcome to Chambers today Roger Stratford, who will be speaking in the public forum. Roger, welcome. You have 5 minutes once you're seated, and the floor will be yours. You're speaking, I understand, on the matters of non-financial service performance measures.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that introduction, Madam Chair. On the point of the non-financial service measures, the report speaks about several priorities for this council, and they all seem very reasonable. And I just want to comment on a city that's easy to live in. This one puzzled me a little bit because it seemed to be very individualistic focused, and people live in the communities. It's important that the communities support people living in the city, and in that way the city will be an easy place to live in. Secondly, it's very concerning that there's been reports of stormwater flooding in the city, and that the response times have not been quite ideal. In the future, I think that the best thing for this council to do would be to support the Three Waters proposal that the government is implementing, mainly because it supports 4 mega entities. With these 4 mega entities, there'll be extra government resource funding for such matters as responding to stormwater and flooding events. which the city has seen over the past year, and it's mentioned in the report. Finally, I'd just like to make a suggestion that with all considerations, two long-standing members have left, and although we have some senior councillors before myself, the long-standing councillors have left, and there have been radical changes due to the STV elections. And I think it would be an excellent idea, considering the state of the communications which I'm hearing coming from this council, particularly some councillors in particular, that for a period of 1 year, we could invite commissioners to oversee how this council runs its finances and monitors the finances. Just for a period of 1 year, and that will get substantially resolve the debt problem which I understand this council has been discussing. Thank you very much. I hope I have been of some value there.
Thank you, Roger. As always, pertinent points you raise. Any questions from members? Thank you, Roger. Thank you for your effort coming in this day. Kia ora. Okay, we move now through the agenda to the Chair's report, page 7. First of my Chair's reports, and a couple of points for me just to mention. I'll take it mostly as read. The first of those is that we held a session yesterday for new members, and Mark Donovan, Councillor Mark, joined us as well, as an opportunity for members to feel that they've got the ability to be able to ask questions, interpret reports, be involved and participate fully in this committee. Well attended, good questions asked, and thanks to staff for accommodating that. There's a request to do more, so for those who weren't there, you're most welcome to join us. For returning councillors, there's an opportunity for you to be involved too if you so wish. The other point to mention is that I talk about the financial performance and strategy report that's coming up in this meeting. Please, members, be disciplined and save your questions on that matter for that item. That's the best place for staff to address your concerns or matters of interest in that area. I think that's enough of a commentary for me at the moment. Are there any questions or comments that councillors would like to make? Now, thank you. I'm fine.
Comment, if I may, Madam Chair?
Indeed.
Thank you very much for spending the time to create a workshop environment for some councillors, particularly the newer ones, navigating ahead of the annual plan with some pretty complex financial situations. So thank you to staff and for you, Maxine, for instigating that. And I understand from everyone who's spoken to me who attended that it was particularly useful. So I want to thank you.
Thanks very much. All right. Well, any other questions or any debate? I have none. Very well. We'll move to a show of hands. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, as I said, the order has changed a little, so we'll be taking now item 8, the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report, and welcome Ian to the, I was going to say stand, but actually it's it's really just the chair.
Yeah, on page 102 of the agenda.
Page 102 on the agenda, so you're going to have to skip into this one, people. Thank you, Ian. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Maxine. Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, elected members. For those of you who I haven't had the opportunity, my name is Ian Anderson. I'm the business manager in the development group. but my background is very much one of finance and accounting, so that's why I'm quite charming when I want to be. I don't know why I said that. I'll start with an apology.
No, you're on track.
Look, today I'm going to introduce the Capital Monitoring Report for the 7 months ended 31st of January. Look, this report, while it has a heavy emphasis on the financial performance of the capital program, it is important to acknowledge that the capital program is as much about the physical delivery and the creation of the assets that are being built and delivered to the community. And I was intending to introduce our capital projects director, Kelly Stokes, who started with us back in 4 months ago. Kelly came to us by way of regional council, and she replaced, those who will remember, Chris Barton. Unfortunately, Kelly has just been a bit waylaid this morning, so she hasn't made it into the chamber, but we will get her here for future meetings and allow her to introduce herself and allow you to be able to ask her any questions in respect, because it's her team that actually deliver this, the bulk of the capital program. This is where the engine room is in terms of the project managers, the contract managers who are out there who are actually at the coalface delivering the assets that you see us being built and we talk about today in this meeting. I will take the report largely as read. However, I would like just to focus on 3 key areas. The first one is attachment 1. Look, we've listened to feedback over the last council period, and we've emphasised, strengthened the focus on the delivery of the program. And to that end, if you look at, if I could take your attention now to attachment 1, you'll see on the front page there's a program sheet for each of the programs, one for each of the programs. And you'll see there that there's a section there called Target Achievements. Just want to emphasise what those are. Those are the target achievements, the key achievements that we said we would deliver through the last LTP. And so each of those are in there. There's a small narrative and a small summary as to what the status is with those, because again, it's important that rather than just talk about simply the cold hard dollars, that we are talking about where we are with those projects, what we're doing. And I think you'll note if you go through the 9 program sheets, largely all of those are in progress and are on target to be delivered. The other thing is, if you turn to the second page of each of those program sheets, you'll find a financial table. Again, the emphasis there was just to strengthen the financial summary for each of the key projects, but also to give a little bit more emphasis around the deferrals, particularly the reason behind those deferrals. And you'll see that what we've done is there's a little table in there called deferral reason, and you'll see some words in there. And if you go to the main body of the report, you'll see that staff have identified 8 root causes for those deferrals, and they're covered in paragraph 41. And so I'll just make reference to that. The second issue I'd like to bring your attention to is the identifying and quantifying inflation risks as they relate to our deferral balances. I think it'd be fair to say that previously deferrals we have never amended deferrals as a result of the inflationary pressures come to bear. Now, the reason for that, from my experience, has been probably threefold. One, deferrals tend to be a short-term issue. The money's only probably moving largely 1 year, 12 months from 1 year to the next, so there's not a lot of time to do for inflation to cause a lot of havoc in terms of the value of the budget. The second thing is, however, is that in many cases deferrals are already a contracted amount, so pricing has already been agreed to and fixed. So again, we remove that inflationary problem from that because the project is already underway. We're just having a small change in the timing of that. And the third one is, historically, the country's been running at such a long period of time where we've had such low inflation rates that it wasn't deemed to be a material issue in terms of the financials. Clearly, that has changed, and I think any of us who are going through and aware of what's happening in the current economic conditions, inflation's been running circa 7% now for the better part of over 12 months and is forecast to continue that level, and therefore it is now prudent to come back and revisit that. So much like we did last year, we've had a look through the deferrals that we brought both into this financial year, and we've looked at the deferrals that we're indicating will move out of this year into next year, and done a bit of a risk analysis on that in terms of those that we believe has a realistic opportunity to add inflation because we either don't have that price certainty or there is an element of uncertainty there. And you'll see what we've done through that is we've calculated that the impact on this year would be to add a further $1.3 million onto the capital program, and then adding a further $3.3 million to the capital program next financial year. If council elected members were happy to accept this approach, then that would mean that the 1.3 I just mentioned would come back through this table, through the forecast, would be added into the capital program for this year, and then the finance director would take this through the financial strategy model and incorporate that into the modelling scenario, and then the 3.3 I mentioned could come through the annual plan process that you're about to embark on Thursday, and include that in terms of, again, making sure it's represented in the financial modelling. So again, just to reiterate what we did, we went through, we looked at each of the projects, identified the risk, and then we've applied the 7%, which I think has been the acknowledged rate that we think is appropriate, just to give us a little bit more confidence within those budgets. The last thing is I'd like to just make mention of is, because again it's very topical, I think we were all very well aware of the cyclone that hit the country a couple of weeks back. So all we're doing is we're flagging there is a potential risk to the delivery and the pricing of the capital program in the future. Clearly there's going to be a significant drain on resources both locally and nationally as the country responds to the repair and rebuild of those damaged areas, and potentially that could have some impact on us. We don't know what that impact may be, but I think it's important that we flag that now and let you know that staff are aware of it and staff are monitoring that situation, and should anything materialise, we would be back in front of you very quickly to quantify that and let you understand the impacts of it. I'm going to stop there and take any questions. However, as I was speaking, apologies for doing this a little bit thing, our Capital Projects Director did arrive, so I'm sorry, Kelly, to do this to you off the thing, but would you mind just introducing yourself to the
Come right up, Kelly,
Yeah.
to the front desk. And welcome on behalf of the meeting. Welcome to your new role.
Thank you very much. Kia ora. Ko Kelly Stokes toku ingoa. So I'm the Capital Projects Director. Someone's doing roadworks on Cobham, and it took me a little bit to get here today. Thank you very much for having me here today. And as you're aware, Sarah Seal, Ian and I work closely together on the capital program. So thank you for having me to my first meeting.
Kia ora.
Cool, so I'll get Kelly to sit there because invariably there's always some questions around the physical delivery of the program, which normally Chris Allen will address. But look, I'm now happy to take any questions in respect to the report.
And Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Just to start with a question to make sure I've read the chart properly. In terms of the red, like if you look at Hamilton Gardens Development Program, there's a negative 2.7 million. Is that a identified deferral, or is that additional cost on the project? That's over budget project? Is that what that means? In those...
Sorry, I'm looking at...
well, any of those charts, page 114 has one identified for Hamilton Gardens. There's also one for Founders, West Town Belt, sorry. Is that increased capital costs?
Sorry. It's a deferral, I believe. Sarah Seal able to comment on that?
So all those red columns where they've got in the brackets the red figures, that's the identified deferrals.
That's a deferral unless the comment says something different. But yes, that's the identified
Okay,
deferral.
so you have to look carefully at the comment. I know it has the same capital result, but but I just wanted to know what the driver was. So you're saying they're largely are deferrals, but you have to look at the text. Okay, cool. Most of them are deferrals. Okay, that helps a little bit.
For our councillors online, that's been identified as deferrals.
For the most part.
For the most part. Those numbers in red are on the finance pages. I'm looking at 112, but it's the second page on each of the project reports.
Yeah, because that
Thank
does
you.
make a difference to the driver of the costs. That was all, just to keep us focused. I've got a couple of questions on the cyclone and the weatherproof. In the text, I can't remember what page it is, you do identify a significant risk around response to the cyclone. And my question, I guess, is have we been able to identify the increased costs of that at this point, or potentially the future costs, or is that work that will be done in terms of building resilience into capital projects?
No, look, it's very much just a heads up to say, look, this is a very recent event, and I'm sure, as we've all seen in the mainstream media, they're talking about billions of dollars required in repairs. We fully expect that there will be some draw on resources to respond to that. It could potentially impact on this market, but we don't know that. We just wanted to give you a heads up now, let you know that we're aware of it and we're monitoring it. And once it quantifies or we have some degree of certainty around it, we will certainly come back here very quickly and make you aware of that.
Yeah, look, I'm very interested in the three, Madam Chair, in that particular metrics. Luckily, Hamilton fared very well during the cyclone. We lost a little bit of light infrastructure and trees and things, but we didn't have a catastrophic failure of any infrastructure, which was really good news for us. But I'm also interested if you will be looking to inform us for the LTP around reprioritising any capital works that may be required to future-proof as against, because there's another potential cyclone on the way, might skirt past us, might not, on the weekend. So we never know when one of these new tropical cyclone type of events will come. So just for us building in resilience in the LTP, that's my question, I guess. Will that be a piece of work that we can rely on for making any re-priorities in the LTP?
Look, in my opinion, Your Worship, yeah, I would 100% say that there'll be a lot of discussion, a lot of debate around the robustness of the country's infrastructure in response to that and how we're best prepared to deal with that. So I'd fully expect that staff will be looking at that very, very closely in terms of the capital program, ensuring that the money's being invested in the right areas to mitigate or to minimise any future impacts.
Okay, that's great, thank you, because we do know that they're quoting that the costs of this may be equivalent to the Christchurch earthquake when you spread it across all those communities and the amount of damage, and that's significant for New Zealand and for insurance as well. So we should be also wary of the insurance impacts on the country and therefore on our local insurance.
That's correct.
100%.
Thank you, and I'll be interested in that when we get more oversight about what that looks like. Thanks, David. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And Deputy Mayor Angela.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Just want to clarify, when you were presenting, you said, oh, that's the wrong question. Now I've got to remember it. You mentioned about deferrals being, sounded to me like you were saying they weren't, were basically completed, disposed of capital deferrals that are less than or longer than sort of 12 months old, because we had a period of time where we're sitting on deferrals from 2018, 2019. So is that correct? Did I hear you?
You did, Councillor, really early, and look, my statement was a little bit of a generalisation. The bulk of the deferrals are generally short-term, they're only moving. We do have some, unfortunately, we do have some that have got a longer duration, but I like to think that they're not the norm, they are the exception to it.
Yeah. So what are those? So there's not, you've got some, there are some pages in here with projects listed, but it doesn't give me that to know that there's a particular project, and it might be a big one that we've been sitting on for, 3 or 4 years. That's not in this information, is it?
I'm afraid, no, you're unable to ascertain that from the report as it's presented. I mean, it's something we could look at to give you a better insight as to not so much where the deferral comes from, but where it's going into, and that'll start to show you that, the large part, they come from this year into next year, as opposed to they go into not next year but the year after. So it's something, it's data we do have, and it's data we could look to incorporate into the report to give you that
We used to
profile
present it to these meetings, so I'm not, look, I'm quite interested in that. If you could even just follow up in the next week or so with an email.
100%. Look, I'll work with our PMO office and we'll look to do that and get something out to you through email if that's acceptable.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. I think that's a really good point for Ian to ruminate on and to think about how he might be able to present that information to future meetings, if you could. Thank you, and Kelly. That's it from you, Deputy Mayor? Thank you. Councillor Naidoo-Ralph.
Thank you. Question around the SURF program. You talk about the largest single item is the addition of the 5 mil for SURF on
Yes.
page 102.
Yes.
So that's, the bulk of the 9.2, so I get that. And then further in the report, in the attachment, page 126, with the biking micromobility implementation on the table, it's got, current total budget 47.1 million. And then at the end, it says that there's internal capacity is the reason for deferrals, and that the remaining budget will be used to make up some of the SURF local share. So what is the actual amount that would be new?
In respect to the biking and micromobility implementation program?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out, is that 5 million needed if it's coming from the existing budget? Or is that, or am I reading that wrong?
In terms of that, and then the
first page.
SURF program?
Yeah.
So, in terms of, let's break it down. So the SURF program that we mention in there is obviously that's the funding that central government have given us. I believe it's circa 37 million in total. The impact on the current financial year is the 5 million that we're putting in front of you today, with the remainder hitting the capital program next financial year. So it'll come through in the annual plan debate that you're having in a couple of days. So that's how that, in that particular one is. And specifically to your question, SURF and micromobility, I'm sorry, I will just have to look to my left and ask, is either Sarah and or Chris able to answer that?
Could I just try? I think this might be the answer. So the SURF package, which has come to council and it's got to come back to the next infrastructure operations, it's around about 32 million. The bulk of that is from central government, but some of it is local share. So in the order of around about the $2 to $3 million, I think, something about $3.3 million. So that note there is just saying that that local share is coming from that biking and micromobility program. So,
all
but
right.
we're coming back to the next infrastructure operations committee. Remember, we bought the full program of $30-odd million, but council committee wanted to have another look at the programs and just agree which ones they wanted to do.
Okay.
So we'll bring that forward there. The $5 million is our assessment at this point in time of how much, we signed the agreement, we can get underway and get some projects underway of how much we can spend of the $30-odd million program, and all of that is that assumption of 5 million is the central government share.
Got you. Thank you. So that it's just referring to the capital program, not where the money's coming from. I understand. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm very happy to talk to councillors offline on that, particularly as we're coming up to the Infrastructure Operations Committee. I think it'll all be clear on SURF there, just as per your last resolutions.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it for you, Councillor Kesh? Lovely. We'll have an opportunity also to be able to talk more about the SURF, its projects through Deputy Mayor Angela's committee, and the chance to talk about how that's funded there too. Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Bitter.
Thank you. So very nice, clear reporting and imaging for the CAPEX projects. As the CAPEX projects are completed and then you move on to ongoing maintenance and stuff for OPEX, is there a way of providing us some insight into the upcoming OPEX for the next year's budgets, and also the impact on that of deferrals, just so that we have a clear understanding of how the CAPEX is impacting OPEX in the future?
Could I jump in there? I think it's very much an annual plan issue that we picked up already, and when we come to the annual plan meeting, there's some paragraphs in there about consequential OPEX is the term that we use for the notion you're providing. So that it's a big part of the delivering the annual plan, and we've got visibility at that meeting coming up.
Great.
It's your questions? All right. I see no further questions. Thank you, Ian and Kelly. I'll go to, I'm happy to move the staff motion on page 102 that we receive the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I have no debate. Is there any debate today? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. It will not come as a surprise to my colleagues who've been here for a while, or to staff, how I feel this organisation has managed deferrals, continues to need improvements. I'm delighted to hear today that we're making some progress about identifying the true cost every time we defer. And you'll recall that I had asked, and others had asked on multiple occasions, for that to trickle down so that we could actually get some optics of understanding when we defer what is the consequential cost of that. And you would have heard today figures of 3 and a bit million going forward. Can you just imagine if we hadn't been pushing for that sort of information, how that can suddenly blindly hit us? And it's a great message to staff that every time now they consider doing a deferral of a CapEx project, that we'll want to know that they've taken the time to think what is actually the consequential cost of that action, and where are they going to find that additional funding. I'm also very pleased to hear that we're finally addressing the issues of inflation, and that we're finally being more proactive. Although I accept some parts that, New Zealand had enjoyed a period of low inflationary activity, the reality is you would have had to have been living under a rock to think that in the last 24 months there was not going to be inflationary pressures. And we as an organisation, in my opinion, have been slow, but we're now beginning to pick up the urgency. And then finally, where there is still clearly work needing to be done, and in fact I swear, and I'd love to go back through some old records of meetings, this Finance Committee, we had already asked for a summary table of deferrals in age category, because despite the suggestion that most deferrals are just a 12-month thing, the reality is some are a lot longer than that. And there is an argument philosophically that that should be very clear and present in how we report to our ratepayer, because we will have rated for these projects, and there would have been an expectation. And if some of them stem back to 2018 or before, then we as an organisation need to be addressing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other debate? Very well. I just want to wrap this item up with a thanks to staff.
Chair, sorry, I was
Thank
slow
you.
to put my little hand up.
My apologies. I forget we've got online. It's always a bit tricky when.
I was slow reaction there. I just wanted.
Welcome.
I felt compelled to respond to something, which was, firstly, I think that the reporting around the deferrals is excellent in terms of being able to see the reason behind the deferrals. So I'd like to thank staff for the work that they've done around that. But I also just want to point out that actually it's been explained to us before that we do take into account a certain degree of deferrals when we're doing our budgets anyway. So it's not correct that we're rating for everything and that's in the capital budget. and then that's, things being deferred and we haven't delivered what we've rated for. My understanding, at least, is that there is, to some degree, we expect a certain amount of deferrals, and that's taken into account when we do our budgeting. So, but overall, yeah, just wanted to say thanks for the very clear reporting on those deferrals and projects.
Thanks, Councillor Sarah. And just wrapping up this item again, Mayor Southgate, before I finish. That's all right.
Apologies. Just want to make comment. Thank you for the report, and I accept some of the commentary of Councillor Wilson, who is absolutely right in expressing some concerns about inflation. And I think we have to say he told us so, and we accept that. I think the interesting thing going forward is we're operating in a completely new financial paradigm than when we set off on our LTP for a variety of reasons. I mean, we were grappling with the unknown long effects of COVID on the economy back then, and some unsettled global environments, financial environments in particular. But now, of course, we have a further challenge ahead of us for the LTP, which is weather resilience. Regardless of where you sit on the whole climate debate, it's quite clear that New Zealand needs to become more resilient to the ups and downs of weather and act accordingly with a much more priority than we have in the past. So that's going to change things. And I just want to say to councillors, we're going through an annual plan process on Thursday, and that's an adjustment against annual budgets, really. Have we done what we said we will? Why haven't we? What changed? Do we need to make some small adjustments? But that isn't the substantive piece of work. The substantive piece of work is what we will start doing as soon as we've adopted the annual plan, which is leading into the long-term plan. And that's a little bit more complex because you really do have to think a few years down the line, and we will have to do that. And it will involve reprioritising, and it will involve the conversation, which is what is nice to do. I always hate that term, mind you, because that's all a little bit subjective, versus what are the core priorities for this council. But we're not alone in that. Every council up and down the country will be grappling with exactly how they land on that and how precautionary we are with our approach to finances. So that's going to be a really good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, and seems a little point for my comments now after that. Thank you. But a thank you to staff. There's always a learning about the reports and the way you present. Drop-ins, late. I'll finish and then I'll allow Councillor Donovan to have the last word. Generously. And thank you for being open to expressing different items through these reports. It makes it easy for us to be able to understand and clearly articulate the benefits of. So that said, Councillor Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Somewhat of an oxymoron, a man getting the last word, isn't it? But anyway, we'll push ahead. Shit, in my head that sounded really good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Think before you speak. God. I won't add too much more. I just want to reiterate what Councillor Ewan said about and commend him again on his standing steadfast on that inflationary challenge that we were faced with. I think that was very commendable work. And thankfully the cheese hasn't quite fallen right off the cracker just yet. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, we'll go to the vote then if there's no other debate. With a show of hands, all those in favour? Against? None. Carried. Thank you for that. Now to item 7, and we'll welcome Tracy to the stand.
Court or something. Yeah, I was just going to say, am I getting sworn in or? Well, not so sure today.
Thank you, Tracy. The chair is yours, and page 73 for members.
So good morning, everyone. So I am here today to bring you the January 2023 year-to-date results. So obviously this is the first report from a finance perspective for this new triennium. So you'll see in the executive summary we've tried to cover off as many of the key topics around the results and what is driving them. But I will just take this time to delve into just a little bit more detail, especially for the newer members of our council today. So if we focus on the results that we're showing year to date for both the accounting results, which includes everything, so all of our capital and our operating expenses and revenue, and our balancing the books results, which is our everyday revenue and our everyday expenses. So both of these at the moment are showing a favourable variance to budget. So in our revenue, most of our areas, except for a little bit in the rates space, is showing favourably. And the key areas is the interest received in the revaluation of our HIF loan. So the HIF loan is largely around timing over the last few years of when we basically spend that money and when we collect it. So in our expenditure accounts, we've been tracking to budget in most areas as well. Again, the two largest variants, ironically, is finance costs, so you're seeing the other side of that, and in our gains on losses. And both of those are related to our lending. So we have half of our lending unfloating and half of our lending that is hedged or fixed. So with regards to that, the interest costs obviously for the floating portion is increasing with the market rates, but because we've got the other half fixed at better rates, we're seeing that gain from a market perspective in our fair value. So with regards to our forecast, so we try during the next sort of 6 months trying to look at what our June balance is going to be. So this takes into consideration any additional revenue and expenses that weren't budgeted, and those that are tracking above budget. So especially with regards to the storm and things that have just happened over the last couple of weeks, when we come to the next committee, I'll be able to bring to you what we are foreseeing as additional costs that we've spent due to that event. So at the moment, all we've forecast is basically in our revenue and expenses for those interests that we've already talked about. And again, as an Ian's report you saw today with the deferral of those capital projects, that also changes our forecasting for our capital revenue as well. So just before I finish off with questions, I just need to make a change in the report itself, Chair. So on 4A of our recommendations, it should say paragraph 27, not 32. So I just need to make that change, please.
Very good. You've captured that?
Thank you.
Perfect. And two questions in this case then. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah. Tracy, you mentioned the HIF loan. I was just trying to find it in the report. Is there any risk, because it was a 10-year term, is there any risk posing for us around that and then delivery of projects baked into that?
No, so I have a little thing here I can read to you if you like. It's something I prepared a bit earlier. So basically what happens is we, obviously when we're spending the money, we then go and do our submission to get that money and quarterly, and every quarter, and we do our drawdowns requests on the actual expenditure incurred. So just to update you on where we're at with that. So each drawdown is a term of 10 years, and we've done 17 drawdowns so far to the value of 98.2 million. We've got 2 pending drawdowns worth 26.5. So we are thinking, the team is thinking that by the end of this year we would have finished all of those drawdowns.
So what would be the total of those drawdowns? Sorry,
180.3 is
so the next two are big ones?
Yep.
Okay, and remind me again, that's an interest-free loan?
Yes,
so that has
for
no
10
bearing
years.
on, does that have any inflationary pressure then?
No, not the loan itself, no.
Great, okay, thank you.
Just supplementary to that, there will be the need to begin to start repaying the loan. Can you give us just a little bit of an update on that matter? I understand there was an agreement with, is it DIA, to defer that further. Is that correct?
Yes, Andrew did a great job in renegotiating the timing of when we do those repayments. So the first repayment we were due to pay was at the end of June of this year, and we are now deferring it to mid-35, 2035. That's right, Andrew?
If I may, so just at the risk of just covering some old ground, so each quarterly drawdown is an individual interest-free 10-year loan. So it's not, there isn't just one loan. So every quarter you end up with a number of individual 10-year interest-free loans. Each loan is then due at the end of the 10-year period. In addition to that repayment, the council, or the agreement the council signed off on, has some fixed value repayments. We have renegotiated the deferral of almost all of those fixed value repayments outside of this 10-year plan period. So it's $16.4 million of repayment deferrals, if that's the right language. And so council gets to enjoy the interest costs saved on that quantum. But that's been formally agreed with Treasury and was brought to this council, I think it was the end of last year for approval as well.
I think you're right. And in terms of that, there is no penalty or additional cost that we would need to wear for that.
There is no penalties. It's a mutually agreed change to the terms and conditions around repayments.
Perfect. Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Bidder.
Max. Tracy, the half and half split between fixed and floating rates, is that a policy to have a 50-50 split, or is there any freedom for adjusting the amounts? And the reason I'm asking this is in the residential mortgage sector, floating rates on average are a premium above fixed rates. So if there was any flexibility for us to shift that balance, if you thought that more fixed might make us better off, we could adjust the policy if that was what was setting the 50-50 split.
Great question. So actually our policy says we can fix up to 90% of our lending. So what's been happening over the last few years, obviously being on a floating has been obviously more beneficial. The other issue that we've been dealing with is Three Waters. So remembering Three Waters takes away our debt, takes away our revenue, and so there's been a conscious decision not to fix as much, because as soon as that debt and that revenue disappears, you potentially go from 50 to 60% fixed up to 70, 80, 90% fixed. So that's not something that I particularly thought that we wanted to be in at that point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick one, Tracy. Point 26 talks about the drop in rates income. And I was just interested if you could explain it a bit, or the 600 properties kind of, what's that about?
Sure. So you'll remember last year we revalued the whole city, and so obviously the rates bills are valued based on the revaluation, so of the capital value of each of those properties. You'll also remember that we had quite a lot of objections, and the timing of that, when we were doing all of that piece of work, and the timing of us doing the budget kind of crossed over. So when we put the budget together for the rates for this year that we're currently in, we had to make an assumption around how many of those objections would come to fruition. So remembering most of them, if people are objecting, that means that they don't like the value of their property, and 99% of the time it's going to be less than what we obviously were holding in our records at the time. So as we go through each of those objections, we obviously then have to change our rating records and what we hold, and then rechange what we are collecting on the revenue perspective. So that's why it's a little bit less, because a lot of those objections have come back erring on the side of a lower capital value.
So has that ever happened before? I mean, 600 sounds like a lot.
This is the first time we've done a full capital value of the whole entire city, and as you can imagine, at the time it was done, it was delayed as well. We were in the peak of all of the residential properties in the September. Within 6 months, that had obviously changed from the real estate market as well. So yes, it is quite high, and normally we would have had all of that done and dusted before we got to the revenue portion. So we would have recalculated it differently. But like I say, the timing of it due to various reasons, it kind of crossed over. So,
Cool. Yep. Thank you.
Before I come to you, Councillor Wilson, just if you would indulge me, is it a usual practice that rates are not paid or held until that agreed value is
no, so we'll always
resolved?
set the rates. We legally have to set the rates on the 1st of July. So we will set them based on whatever that value is in our system. And then obviously as each of these objections go through, we manually have to process that, get it back and make those adjustments.
But in those instances, the residents who are objecting have a hold on their rates debt.
It depends. So again, different circumstances. Some might not want to pay. Some might have them already just set up as direct debits and then they'll get credits back and things like that. So it kind of depends on what their payment schedule is themselves. So remember, we set the rates on the 1st of July, but the first payment's not normally due until September, I think, August, September. So in that amount of time, we might have obviously then changed what they were meant to be paying. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
Over to you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Maxine. Tracy, always really, I enjoy your reports. They're always really accurate and I like them. Just a quick question on page 76, 34. Development contributions performed well in the first half of the year. With 5 months left, is there any early indication that we're going to not achieve the projected development contributions for the balance of the year? I'm just mindful that developers are just maybe slowing down or being a little hesitant, and I'm just interested in how that could affect our revenue and if there's any early indications, because revenue is gold.
it is. Do you want to answer that, Blair?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Look, there are a number of factors at play. We're certainly seeing activity slowing, as you referred to. At this stage, the team are not putting their hand up to say there's any major variance that they're anticipating, but as you will all know, that it can be the timing of one or two major payments between June and July can dramatically affect that. So I wouldn't like to sit here and say that we're going to hit budget. Certainly the first 7 months we are tracking online. There are a number of reasonably large DC payments in the wind, but as to when they finally land, and some of those we're just working through the remissions calculation and a few discussions, so they could mean that we don't hit budget, but equally we could get close to or attain. So a little bit of a convoluted answer. The outlook, I would suggest, as we look to the next financial year, probably is a lower DC revenue than budgeted at this stage, is probably if I would foreshadow that. And that's just in line with the slowing activity, but the long-term forecasts we remain very confident over. So
If I could one more, we're not getting an indication that these projects or developments are not going to go ahead. Is it your opinion that developers are just being cautious and it's a timing issue?
Correct, and they are conscious of their own cash flow, and they are managing their business in a sustainable way. So absolutely, they're very confident about Hamilton. It's just the timing and interest rates and other things have just caused everyone to slow back a bit. So
cool, thank you.
And just to remind you that it pays the debt. DC's pay down debt as well, so not from an operational perspective, but yeah, it is gold.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And to Councillor Pike.
Yeah, Maxine, thank you. This is just a question on the back of Councillor Bitter's questions around floating and fixed rates. Has it been investigated into potential savings of fixing and what our penalties would be if we had to have an early payback due to Three Waters structure changing?
That's a really, really hard question because the DIA actually don't know, and they've changed their minds 3 times around how they're going to pay us for that Three Water debt. So, hence the reason why we're, to be fair, that's the reason why I made one decision 18 months ago, because they told us one thing. I would have changed my mind a year ago if they'd so yeah, it is really hard for us right now with trying to figure out what they are wanting and obviously what's the best sort of deal for us. So as far as all of our fixed terms, so we had a lot of benefit from some deals we did last year for the annual plan that we're currently in with some of that hedging. But yes, there is a piece of work going on behind the scenes to determine if I had fixed more 18 months ago when I perhaps would have made a different decision and what we would be and what that would look like now. So I am doing that, yes.
Thank you.
I think just to add to Tracy's answer, and she's answered it really well, is that just for those new elected members, we have a strong relationship with PwC's Treasury team. So on a regular basis, Tracy and the team work with PwC to understand what the future looks like as best as possible and get some external sort of lens across that as well, just to give councillors confidence.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to our online councillors, Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. Tracy, I was wondering, have we, and again on the topic of hedging, have we looked, I guess, at the overall net impact of our hedging practices, say over 10 or years or however, I guess, over a longer period of time to see how it kind of washes up? Because there is, I guess, there's risks both ways in terms of interest rates going lower than we expect and higher than we might expect.
Yep, so if you look at our hedging portfolio there, it's basically chunks of money over various time periods at various rates. So that's what when we're doing blend and extends and forwards and all those sorts of things. So there's a variety. We don't match our actual borrowings to the hedging. It's actually quite mismatched. So we are always, as David said, we're always working with PwC to look at what's coming up, what the market's going to do, and what we currently have as far as time period. So, and again, it depends on what the market is doing as to what we can get. So we just tried to do some hedging recently, and it wasn't worth it for us. It was going to cost us too much money, so we didn't do it. So, and yet a week later, the rates change, everything changes, so we took it up a couple of weeks later. So, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm not sure. My question possibly wasn't very well worded, and I'm happy to take it offline if I can't quite phrase it right. But it was more from an accounting sense. There's kind of gains and losses in terms of the impact of hedging. So when we look at, I'm happy to take it offline. I can ask you.
No problem. I can do that with you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And that looks like the end of questions. I'm happy to move, and Deputy Moko to second. Do we have any debate? Then let's move to the vote. Councillor Sarah, your hand is up for debate? No. Okay, thank you. An old hand. So we'll go to the vote then. All those in favour by a show of hands? And against? It's carried. Thank you. That's 4, Mayor Paula? Thank you. Very good. Well, we're making good time here, team. So now we move to item 6, our non-financial services performance measures, and invite Katie and Julie to present. welcome. Katie, have you been to our committee before? You have. Great. The floor is yours, and if you can take us through some main points, that would be much appreciated by the meeting and by our visitor today. Thank you.
Ko Katie Takaingawa, here Strategic Performance Manager Aho. E te kaunihera o Kirikirawa. I'm here today to inform the Finance and Monitoring Committee on the progress of the non-financial service performance measures. The measures are set out in the long-term plan, and I'm updating you on the first 6 months of year 2. We have 62 performance measures, 40 are on track, 6 need corrective action, 7 will not be achieved, and for 9 of them we're still waiting data, normally because they're an annual measure. I take the report as read, but are happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Is there anything that you wanted to highlight at all for us to be aware of, Katie?
Of the 7 that we will not achieve, they are the voter turnout in the local body election, the 3 years of capacity of business zoned land supplied in the city, the number of infringement notices, enforcement notices and convictions for wastewater system discharge, flooding events that occurred within the city, the median response time for the flooding events, the number of complaints about the performance of our stormwater system, and the number of valid mist collections or curbside rubbish and waste recycling.
Thank you. And we've already got questions on the board. We'll start with Mayor Paula.
Yeah, just looking at the paragraph 18 with those things that you've outlined, are there any particular, well, the number of flooding events, you can't control that. I won't make you responsible for that, but
appreciate that.
You'll be pleased to know. And I'm not going to make you responsible for this either, but in terms of the issues around stormwater and wastewater, to what extent did we have any control over those?
I will just direct the question to Eva-Lisa and her team.
Sorry, hard question, I know, but you know.
So through the chair, it's all dependent on which performance measure. Like if it's in relation to response time, dependent on the number of, I guess, calls that we get and the severity of the rainfall at the time, it determines how quickly we can actually get to each site, which then determines whether we meet the KPI or not. And I'm just looking at Mairi because she is sitting here in case to steer me in the right direction. So those are things that our teams basically drive to the location, and once it's logged, they drive there. And that's where sometimes when there are multiple events happening at the time, which over November, December, January, February did occur, it's a bit of a struggle for our team to actually manage that response.
So just in terms of if there had not been those cyclones, of 2 of them, if there had not been those weather events, you're confident that for the most part all of those targets would have been met?
Yes, normally we do meet those targets, and it is around, we don't maximise our resourcing for those events, so we manage them when they do occur.
Thank you, that's very clear, thank you.
Maybe, Mayor Paula, can I just add, just to give you some clarification, in December 22, 9 of the flooding events occurred of the 11, so it was very isolated to that specific weather event.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, apropos of the questions I was asking in the previous items around our response readiness for, obviously, huge cyclonic events, but we know we have to be more resilient, so just sort of getting at the underlying factor. But
yeah, so our teams do go out and proactively look at the city network to try and minimise the impact. In some instances, we just can't. And so for that event, that was an intense rainfall event that was pretty unexpected in terms of intensity.
Well, that's good. That just answers my question, because I just want to make sure that we're attributing the non-performance to the right aspect rather than an underlying factor that we're overlooking because of the cyclones. Thanks. Just another question in terms of I hate getting down in the weeds, but I'm just going to, just for now. The percentage of residents who are proud of how Hamilton looks and feels, and that needs some corrective action. Can you explain to me what that relates to and what the corrective action, because I know that even though we've got massive things to deal with in a council, for the public, the appearance of the city has been a massive issue this term, I think we'd all agree. So I'm just wondering what that looks like going forward. Because I'd like never to talk about a verge or a weed again, but, you know.
Yes. So, yes, this is an area where we both, in people thinking about how the city looks and feels, but also pride in the city, is an area where we've seen a decline to what we usually expect. A couple of, we're just doing some more detailed analysis of that to understand that across, if there's any variation across our areas of the city, and also age profile and ethnicity as well. But basically the key messages that are coming out are two things that are driving this. One, of course, is crime. You know, people have been hearing lots and lots about dairy ram raids, etc., and that is, of course, one of the biggest thing that is of concern to people. The second thing is that there is a lot of commentary about how tidy the city looks generally, and we're just trying to do a little bit more of a dive into that to see if we can get a little bit more information. It is, I think, partly to do with the fact that we've had a very wet December and we weren't mowing as much as what we usually do, so people do, and weeds grew very well because it was very hot as well. So there is that factor, and that is what we see, particularly, I was just looking at the reports that I've got here. The older age group had a lot more commentary about how untidy the city looks. So that's a big thing, how that looks, but also just generally about must should be general tidiness across the city. So again, it's corrective action. What we're doing is we're getting a bit more information that goes back out to the various groups who look after our city, our operational areas, both in parks and in infrastructure ops, to help them understand what people are seeing. If we can, we'll get some more information from our residents using our panel, but it's very much some of the things we can fix. So we can definitely look at how do we address some of the mowing things, etc. But some of the crime things we can have input into, but we're not the only ones that need to fix those. Sorry,
Thanks.
long answer.
Thanks. I guess I'm fortunate enough to be across what we can and can't do in crime space, and I know Deputy Mayor O'Leary has got some good work underway in terms of addressing the city appearance with gateways and potential median strip solutions here. Weeds. Weeds. That would be excellent for us all, I think. Just in terms of the average processing days for building consents, and our staffing levels and ability to correct this, how are we trending with that? Because I know, Lance, it's been an issue to get staff in the current market for all of these things, but is there what's the corrective solution for that? Anybody?
I'll let Blair answer this one.
Sorry, curly questions, but important.
I can provide comfort to council that we continue to focus on staff retention as well as recruitment of staff in planning and building areas. The market has been extremely challenging, but I think I'm pleased to see that within the KPIs we're actually either on track or just slightly over. And I note that the targets we've set ourselves for those are less than the legislative requirements of 20 working days. So, we set ourselves a high bar of 18 working days, elected members. So I'm comfortable, albeit focused on trying to support those teams and to recruit the right staff.
Yeah, and follow up from that, thanks Blair, the work that Murray Hickey and his team are doing under your team around digital efficiency, when would we expect those kind of changes to make a difference to the process?
I think the digital work is an ongoing piece of work. I think that it's probably simplistic to say digital is reflective of the timeframes. The timeframes are more a case of the complexity of the matters that the team are having to navigate in terms of the consenting matters and the legislative framework and the requirements to work through. But certainly the digital work is rolling over the next few years, and we are constantly making tweaks and improvements to our process, Mayor Paula. But a lot of this is in relation to just the increasing complexity of consents and what we're having to manage and consider in terms of the various elements, and that's where the time goes.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, just a request of staff to have a further look at that, so we can get a greater understanding of what some of those complexities are, but also a greater depth of understanding on the improvements that are being made in the technical and digital space to deal with easy matters and sort of clear those off out of people's inboxes, so to speak, which I hope will give more time for complex issues. But I'm interested in that. I think at the end of the day, it still becomes a relative strategic outcome of this council to improve in that area. So if we could look at that a bit
Thank you,
more
Mayor Paula.
closely. Thank you,
It
Madam
seems
Chair.
that there would be a natural
Thanks,
place
Claire.
in another committee for that reporting. Is that your
Yeah, we can come
understanding?
back with that. Just to add to what Blair said, there's been an ongoing project through CoLab, our shared services company, just looking at building control matters. And to be honest, that got overtaken by COVID and other things. So there's some discussion at the relative CoLab fora about actually having a look at that again, because and something that Councillor Ewan alluded to earlier in the meeting, just around how the market is going around consenting and building and stuff like that. And if potentially there's a contraction through to economic pressures over the next wee while, then there has to be some flexing and also contraction in staffing levels at various councils. And I've heard from some of our fellow CEs that some of their building people aren't as busy as our building people. So, and it's a little bit more complex than that. But how do we actually work closer together in the future going forwards? And I think that's it's something that's been highlighted in the future of local government panel work as well. So we'll carry on exploring that as well. How do we work closer together, and what might be possible? So I'll include some narrative on that and talk to Kelvin French from CoLab. We can give an update on that as matters progress.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Mayor Paula, that's
Yes, thank
your questions? Wonderful. So I'll take a question from Councillor Bidder, then go to online. It's Sarah, and then back to the board.
The wastewater measure that's not being achieved, the number of infringement notices, enforcement orders and convictions received in relation to resource consents for discharge from the wastewater system. Are we getting not enough convictions or too many?
Oh, God, one's too many.
No.
We can only answer about the data that's in front of us, so this is about the event that has occurred, and we are now in the process that even though the event was last year, the conviction has been issued in this financial year, so we have to pick it up into this report.
Right.
So if I can progress that,
Yep.
Any conviction, even if it's one, is too many for us in terms of an outcome, and so our team works really hard to work towards the zero target for that performance measure.
Yeah.
Any supplementary from that?
No, I think that clarifies.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councillor Bidder. And to our online councillor, Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. And I also, I guess, stood out to me the 41% of respondents being happy with the way Hamilton looks and feels. And I'm just wondering, there's a number of elements to that are in our control. Is it worth us actually pulling that all together and, for the long-term plan, having a bit of a comprehensive approach to how we improve on that?
Yes, Councillor Sarah. That's a really good question, and it is one of the reasons why we do these pulse surveys, to start getting a feel for that. As part of the long-term plan, we do want to do a little bit more of an extensive survey in terms of understanding what's really important to people for improving their wellbeing. And so, yes, we do intend to use this data, but also build on this a little bit more so we have a more comprehensive understanding coming into the LTP.
Okay, and so, for example, an option, we could have almost like a package of service level improvements, if that's what to consider, that respond to the, I guess, prevailing concerns around the look and feel of the city.
Yes, I think we need to start with identifying what the real issue is, so what is driving people's perception, and getting that underlying information first. And it's really interesting, the group that has the biggest concern at the moment about how the city looks is youth. So it's about being able to understand that sort of level of detail a little bit more.
So Sarah, what we'll do in the LTP, we'll be having some workshop sessions so we can, have a discussion, not just you guys get talked at or anything, but like Julie says, we'll provide the background information, and then I think we just have a discussion and then actually look at where it fits into our priorities.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And interesting outcome, maybe it's a case of where people can afford to live in the city or something. All right, thanks.
And Deputy Mayor Angela.
Just on page 23, the measure for deaths and serious injuries, am I reading that right, that the previous year, so our KPI is a decrease, it's got a green light, decrease from previous year, which says 51, and then this year to date, so halfway through the year, we're only at 14, is that correct? So that's, am I reading that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yep, so I guess we're anticipating a significant reduction in deaths and serious injuries on our roads.
That's certainly what we're hoping for.
Yeah, that's good news. Page 25, just this is, and again, it is a green light, so I apologise for that, but just this is on footpaths and road, relating to requests for footpaths and roads repairs, etc. It just says, and maybe this is one for the General Manager, I don't know, 97% were responded to within 5 working days, either through communication with the customer or steps taken to resolve the issue. I'm just trying to work this out because I, like other elected members, are getting an increasing complaints from citizens saying that we haven't closed the loop. So we haven't gotten back to them and said, thank you very much, it's going to be sorted, or it is sorted, or we're not sorting it, whatever. And that's what this is telling me, that it says we respond within 5 working days, either with communication with the customer or steps taken to resolve it. So are there a whole lot of complaints that we don't get back to the person making the complaint?
I'll ask Elise to
Yeah.
So through the chair, an honest answer there would be, I believe that in many instances we aren't closing the loop, and it's something that as a team we're working really hard to actually get that in train, particularly with the multiple channels that we have coming into the organisation with those complaints. So we have phone calls and Tino, and it's how we manage and triage those going through. But particularly through elected member priorities who have always said to us that getting back and closing the loop with the customer is incredibly important, and that's something that we're trying to work through to make sure we do achieve that.
Yeah, okay. And then that kind of feeds into page 32, and I'm just wondering, I'm not actually sure where I can raise this. So this is about noise complaints, and again, I apologise. This has got a green light on it. It says the percentage of complaints about excessive noise responded to within 30 minutes. I know that Calvin is not here, so I don't want to drag the meeting on. Can I get some information back to understand what responded to within 30 minutes means. Helen?
Yeah, I can answer that.
You
So
can?
responding to is like responding to the complaint, so.
So it's
going
not
to the
necessarily
noise.
shutting the noise
Not necessarily,
down.
because not all will meet the criteria to be shut down.
Yeah.
But that is what it's measuring, is the response to the complaint, not whether the noise is actually stopped or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess this fits into the other one. So I don't know whether this will be Councillor Kesh's committee or my committee or somewhere else. I think we're under using Antenno again. There must be a message back system when someone makes a complaint, and it possibly, there's nothing worse, and I know personally, when you make a complaint, a noise complaint, you don't know what happens, and unless that music goes off, you never hear back, and it's incredibly frustrating. So would that be, in terms of a customer service closing of all of these really little things that irritate people, is that, Helen, will that sit with you?
Yeah, I'll look into that. That does sit with Calvin in my team, so.
Yeah, okay. And
Somebody in this organisation who's doing a great deal of work in this exact space that will be reporting at some stage, who's done some diagnostics, which we will have access to, councillors, it's just not quite ready, and is going to do some work. So we are, as a whole organisation, looking into customer response, aren't we?
Yeah, it's part of our Future Fit program, which will be an outline in the executive update today about what do we look like as a council going forward. It's about processes, resourcing, systems, technology, and a CRM system. So it's it will capture all the things that you're bringing up, and you know, and Eva-Lisa's just highlighted in her area, they've been under particular pressure, and then, you know, there's been resourcing issues and things like that. And then I think what you're alluding to is an educational thing about people to use Antenno, but if they use it, then they need to get a response back that they know that, you know, it might be a little message saying that we can't close down the noise thing because it doesn't meet the decibel level, rah-de-rah-de-rah, that sort of thing. So there's a bunch of things, so we'll come back to you on that as well, what we're doing.
Yeah, sorry to jump in, I was just aware of this very exciting piece of work going on, only from yesterday that I heard about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of aware of it as well, but I'm also aware that it's going to be put up on the chopping block, right? In terms of funding it.
Wow.
Well, some of it,
okay.
yes, some may be new funding, but it also might just be looking at how we're operating at the moment and centralising more what we're doing, or having a hub and spoke model. So it's actually just reviewing what we're doing, so and getting some consistency right across the council. So Michelle Kerb is our customer services manager, and Murray are working with, you know, GMs like Eva-Lisa and Helen and other people right across the organisation. Look, our aim is to get consistent response in all parts of the business. I know we've got 28 different types of outcome areas, but how do we get, you know, people want consistency. So if they go to Hamilton City Council, they know they'll get a response. Someone will answer the phone, get back to them within whatever minutes or days or whatever it is, but it's consistent. So they don't get, you know, one thing at the zoo and something different in building consents.
Cool. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to Deputy Chair Moko.
I note that so this is more around water, and so on page 53 I note that our ability to provide and supply water is green, so that's very good. I note on page 54 that we've had an increase in complaints. Some of those complaints as a result of contractor hiccups perhaps. Just wanting to know who's liable for the cost of having to address the complaint. Is that us or is that the contractor? I'm just tipping that that's built into the contractor's agreement. So that was the first question, and the second question was, have we had to give any boil notices?
So through the chair, the answer to your first question is that yes, that is built into the contractor's contract if any damage or any reasoning comes back. We call it a third party invoice that we do provide them and do recover our costs. And the second answer to your question regarding boiled water notices is no, we haven't.
Ka pai.
hopefully. Hang on, got my red light on now. Both have green lights, but I wonder where we're at with any kind of forward planning or forward thinking of it. The first page 21 around travel times, and acknowledge the impact that the Waikato Expressway, the positive impact that that's had on our roadways. I wonder though, do we have any concerns about possible interruptions to the network or disruption in the coming months due to growth projects, to known roadworks, etc. And how might we preempt any actions that might be planned around overcoming it?
I'm going to have to ask Evelisa again.
Oh, Evelisa, stand
Chris.
up and stay on your feet.
In terms of the impact on travel with the like the growth and the roadworks, in terms of the impact on our travel times, we are closely monitoring that, and we have got some really good data points now around the city in terms of live data points. In terms of assessing those risks, I guess that is a consequence of a growing city, and so it's actually, as elected members have already talked to us around how we tell our story and engage the why and what's happening in that space, so that we actually become we become more knowledgeable as to why the development and growth is occurring, and the reason behind the delay sometimes. But also, what this KPI performance measure also provides you, that assurity that you do have a maximum delay time that you can plan your travel around the city in, on average. There are instances where that doesn't happen, which Kelly showed this morning in terms of Cobham Drive works.
And we've heard already that some of these measures are our own, of our own making, and aren't necessarily those that we have to mandatorily meet. So in terms of these kinds of numbers, is that numbers that we are imposing our standard on?
These measures and targets are all approved through the long-term plan process.
Yes.
And so they are assessed and reviewed during the long-term plan as part of the development of the level of service. And this particular KPI is one that elected members can actually look at to determine the key target based on previous results, and what is realistically achievable for the city.
Thanks. Good to note that it's a green light, yay. And the other part, probably, it may be you or Chris perhaps, is to do with page 24 on the sealed road network. Is there an expectation to stay on track with that green light, given the wet season that we've currently experienced?
Yes, I have had assurance from the Infrastructure Alliance Manager that there is maybe a 1 week delay in that, but they are working very hard to maintain and stay on top of that KPI for this year. Working hard in that.
Well, residents will be
between
happy to know
rain.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, any further questions from the floor, from online? No? Thank you. Look, I'm happy to move that unless we have any other interested parties in the room who would like to, and therefore seek a seconder. Moko? Deputy Moko? Thank you. Is there any debate on these points? We're bumping up to morning tea time, so I can see why you wouldn't want to do that. And I'll invite Moko to tell us a little bit about morning tea in a minute, but let's firstly go to the vote. Sorry? I beg your pardon, Mayor Paula. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I am denied whether I would, but I keep them really short. Thank you for the report. It was it's good to see and be able to track particular different things. Just supporting the comments that have been made through questions around the things that are important, and just getting some assurance that had we not had this severe weather, things may have been in better shape is very reassuring. but we still have some pretty big challenges going forward to face. And speaking in support of the line of questioning that Deputy Mayor Angela was pursuing around closing the loop, which I do feel, having had a few conversations in the last few days, a little bit more optimistic around how that could be, but and how much easier that will make, how much easier it'll make our lives, but it will also make the experience of the customer that much better. I think we're all dedicated to that, so I want to thank the staff that have sat behind that piece of work, or those pieces of related work in your teams, because I think we're all dedicated to giving the best services that we can, and it's time to really drill into what that looks like. So thanks to staff for that work anyway.
Thank you, and we'll go to the vote by a show of hands. All those in favour? And against? Carried unanimously. We'll move to a resolution to exclude the public. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Angela. Thank you, staff, and let's take a 15-minute break to